Good evening. Welcome to Heavy D Storytelling. I'm David Sneed, and I'm going to tell a story. Yay. How's everyone doing today? So we don't have anybody here yet, so you can't actually. Oh, Kimberly likes my video. Oh, that's yesterday's video. I've gotten here. Oh, what? No, I can't do that. Stay on that page. Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start with the Bible time as soon as I get out of that. We are on John chapter 16. Hey, be sure and send it to Ben and Jessica too. John chapter 16. This is the 16th of May, so we're reading from John chapter 16. She said that you were her friend, are you not? Oh. You can look her up, just type her name. What? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, it is what it is. All right. So this is chapter 16 of John, English Standard Version. I have said all these things to you to keep you from falling away. They will put you out of the synagogues. Indeed, the hour is coming when whoever kills you will think he is offering service to God. And they will do these things because they have not known the Father nor me. But I have said these things to you that when their hour comes, you may remember that I told them to you. I did not say these things to you from the beginning because I was with you. But now I am going to him who sent me, and none of you asks me, where are you going? But because I have said these things to you, sorrow has filled your heart. Nevertheless, I tell you the truth, it is to your advantage that I go away. For if I do not go away, the Helper will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. And when he comes, he will convict the world concerning sin and righteousness and judgment. Concerning sin, because they do not believe in me. Concerning righteousness, because I go to the Father, and you will see me no longer. Concerning judgment, because the ruler of this world is judged. I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. When the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all truth, for he will not speak on his own authority, but whatever he hears, he will speak, and he will declare to you the things that are to come. He will glorify me, for he will take what is mine and declare it to you. All that the Father has is mine. Therefore, I said that he will take what is mine and declare it to you. A little while, and you will see me no longer, and again a little while, and you will see me. So some of his disciples said to one another, What is this that he says to us, a little while, and you will not see me, and again a little while, and you will see me, and because I am going to the Father? So they were saying, What does this mean by a little while? We do not know what he is talking about. Jesus knew that they wanted to ask him, so he said to them, Is this what you were asking yourselves, what I mean by saying, a little while and you will not see me, and again a little while and you will see me? Truly, truly, I say to you, you will weep and lament, but the world will rejoice. You will be sorrowful, but your sorrow will turn into joy. When a woman is giving birth, she has sorrow because her hour has come. But when she has delivered the baby, she no longer remembers the anguish for joy that a human being has been born into the world. So also you have sorrow now, but I will see you again, and your hearts will rejoice, and no one will take your joy from you. In that day, you will ask nothing of me. Truly, truly, I say to you, whatever you ask of the Father in my name, he will give it to you. Until now, you have asked nothing in my name. Ask and you will receive, that your joy may be full. I have said these things to you in figures of speech. The hour is coming when I will no longer speak to you in figures of speech, but will tell you plainly about the Father. In that day you will ask in my name, and I will not say to you that I will ask the Father on your behalf. For the Father himself loves you, because you have loved me, and have believed that I came from God. I came from the Father and have come into the world, and now I am leaving the world and going to the Father. His disciples said, Ah, now you are speaking plainly and not using figures of speech or figurative speech. Now we know that you know all things and do not need anyone to question you. This is why we believe that you came from God. Jesus answered them, Do you now believe? Behold, the hour is coming, indeed it has come, when you will be scattered each to his own home and will leave me alone. Yet I am not alone, for the Father is with me. I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation. But take heart, I have overcome the world. So that is John chapter 16, read to you on this 16th day of May in 2020. So I just wanted to really briefly just say we would really love to have some Narnian artwork here, or perhaps here, and anything that somebody wants to make. If you want to draw a lion, or if you want to draw two kings and two queens, or whatever it is, that would be highly appropriate in the background here, so that we don't just have a dead space back here. I do have some pictures, but they're not really any of the stories that we're planning on reading. So I just thought that it'd be really appropriate. And once we start reading the Neverending Story, we'll have a contest to see who can draw the best pictures. And we will definitely put those up on the walls once we have some pictures to put up. So without further ado, not adieu, it's adieu, adieu, because adieu is the French word for, it literally means go with God. It's like you're saying like a final greetings, like God bless you when whenever you say goodbye or something. That's literally what adieu means. Anyway, huge tangent. Without further ado, ado, because it's actually A-D-O. It's almost like a compound word, actually. More tangent. Okay, here is Kimberly's synopsis.
So, in the last few chapters, the Narnians, well, you see, there was this weird animal thing, and it looked like the statues of Tosh that they'd seen, and apparently he's real. Yep, wasn't expecting that part, but apparently he's real, and the ape is gonna have a hard time later on. And there was this eagle that flew down and told them that Cair Paravel has been taken. Dun dun dun. And then the centaur that was bringing them help also died, along with the help. So, boo, no. And then after that, they went over to the stable hill, whatever you want to call it, with Puzzle, so that they could show them, look, this is who you thought was Aslan. And just before they took him out, the ape said, someone has been dressing up as Aslan, and it makes it the Aslan that's definitely in the stable, cough, cough, really mad. And that's where we are. And they're like trying to find a way to. Well,
he said,
he said that Aslan is very mad, and because a donkey is dressing up as him.
Because it's not Aslan, it's Tashlin.
Yeah.
Convinced everybody that Tash and Aslan are the same person. whatever.
Oh my gosh, that's so
Okay.
young.
Okay. So, Kim, can you take Chrissy with you? She is, I don't know exactly what, but she can't sit right there or I'm going to step on her. And that won't be a pleasant thing. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. We're on chapter 10. Pretty sure that's where we are. Yeah. Who will go into the stable? Who remembers what the first word is?
What? Wait. It's one of the characters, I know that.
Oh, Daniel's pretty good. Which one is it? There's only like about 15 characters. Well, it severely limits the number of words. No, it's one of the girls. Is the cat a girl? Jill. No, Kimberly, that's too much. That's Kim, go put it back. That's not a snack, Kim. All right. This interlude brought to you by So how's it going, Rebecca? How's your day? Rebecca is the only one. Waiting for Kimberly. No, we don't start when people are downstairs. I have to be able to monitor you, and I can't monitor you. Wait, let me see it. And you still have that much. That's really, like, I can't believe it. You were. We'll talk later. All right. Daniel, you are open unless you got your bunny out. Let me see. All right, can you hear? Hey. All right. Oh, wait. I got to play games with my friend on my Switch, and now I'm drawing on my new phone. I hope you're drawing Aslan or maybe Tosh or something really cool. Why are you drawing on your phone and not your fancy computer? That's what I wonder. All right, chapter 10. Who will go into the stable? Jill felt something tickling her ear. It was Jewel the unicorn whispering to her with the wide whisper of a horse's mouth. As soon as she heard what he was saying, she nodded and tiptoed back to where Puzzle was standing. Quickly and quietly, she cut the last cords that bound the lion skin to him. It wouldn't do for him to be caught with that on, after what the ape had said. She would like to have hidden the skin somewhere very far away, but it was too heavy. The best she could do was to kick it in among the thickest bushes. Then she made signs to Puzzle to follow her, and they both joined the others. I just had a thought. If that thing was really heavy and Puzzle just took it off, that means that Puzzle has a burden that has just been lifted and can actually probably walk around for the first time in a few days, maybe a week or more. All right. Lost my places, joined the others. The ape was speaking again, and after a horrid thing like that, Tashlan is angrier than ever. He says he's been a great deal too good to you, coming out every night to be looked at, see? Well, he's not coming out anymore. Howls and mewings and squeals and grunts were the animal's answer to this, but suddenly a quite different voice broke in with a loud laugh. "Hark what the monkey says," it shouted. "We know why he isn't going to bring his precious Aslan out. I'll tell you why. Because he hasn't got him. He never has anything except an old donkey with a lion skin on his back. Now he's lost that, and he doesn't know what to do." Tyrion could not see the faces on the other side of the fire very well, but he guessed this was Griffel, the chief dwarf, and he was quite certain of it when, a second later, all the dwarfs' voices joined in, singing, "Don't know what to do, don't know what to do, don't know what to do. Silence. Silence! Thundered Rishta Tarkan. Silence, children of mud! Listen to me, you other Narnians, lest I give command to my warriors to fall upon you with the edge of the sword. The Lord Shift has already told you of that wicked donkey. Do you think because of him there is no real Tashlan in the stable? Do you? Beware! Beware! No! No! Shouted most of the crowd. But the dwarf said, "That's right, darky. You've got it. Come on, monkey. Show us what's in the stable. Seeing is believing." When next there was a moment's quiet, the ape said, "You dwarves think you're very clever, don't you? But not so fast. I never said you couldn't see Tashlan. Anyone who likes can see him." The whole assembly became silent. Then, after nearly a minute, the bear began in a slow, puzzled voice. "I don't quite understand all this," it grumbled. "I thought you said—" "You thought," repeated the ape, "as if anyone could call what goes on in your head thinking. Listen, you others. Anyone can see Tashlan, but he's not coming out. You have got to go in and see him." "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you," said dozens of voices. "That's what we wanted. We can go in and see him face to face, and now he'll be kind and it will be as it used to be." And the birds chattered and the dogs barked excitedly. Then suddenly there was a great stirring and a noise of creatures rising to their feet, and in a second the whole lot of them would have been rushing forward and trying to crowd into the stable door all together, but the ape shouted, "Get back! Quiet! Not so fast!" The beasts stopped, many of them with one paw in the air, many with tails wagging, and all of them with heads on one side. "I thought you said—" began the bear, but Shift interrupted. "Anyone can go in," he said, "but one at a time. Who'll go first?" He didn't say he was feeling very kind. He's been licking his lips a lot since he swallowed up that wicked king the other night. He's been growling a good deal this morning. I wouldn't much like to go into that stable myself tonight, but just as you please. Who'd like to go first? Don't blame me if he swallows you whole or blasts you into a cinder with the mere terror of his eyes. That's your affair. Now then, who's first? What about you, one of the dwarves?" "Dilly dilly, come and be killed," sneered Griffel. "How do we know what you've got in there?" "Ho, ho!" cried the ape. "So you're beginning to think there's something there, eh? Well, all you beasts were making noise enough a minute ago. What struck you all dumb? Who's going in first?" The beasts all stood looking at one another and began backing away from the stable. Very few tails were wagging now. The ape waddled to and fro, jeering at him. "Ho, ho, ho!" he chuckled. "I thought you were all so eager to see Tashlan face to face. Changed your mind, eh?" Tyrion bent his head to hear something that Bill was trying to whisper in his ear. "What do you think is really inside the stable?" she said. "Who knows?" said Tyrion. "Two Calormenes, with drawn swords as likely as not, one on each side of the door." "You don't think," said Jill, "it might be, you know, that horrid thing we saw?" "Tash himself," whispered Tyrion. There's no knowing, but courage, child. We are all between the paws of the true Aslan. Then a most surprising thing happened. Ginger the cat said in a cool, clear voice, not at all as if he was excited, "I'll go in if you like." Every creature turned and fixed its eyes on the cat. "Mark your subtleties, sire," said Poggin to the king. "This cursed cat is in the plot, in the very center of it. Whatever is in the stable will not hurt him, I'll be bound. Then Ginger will come out again and say that he has seen some wonder." But Tyrion had no time to answer. The ape was calling the cat to come forward. "Ho, ho," said the ape. "So you're a pert puss, would look upon him face to face. Come on, then. I'll open the door for you. Don't blame me if he scares the whiskers off your face. That's your affair." And the cat got up and came out of its place in the crowd, walking primly and daintily, with its tail in the air, not one hair on its sleek coat out of place. It came on till it had passed the fire, and was so close that Tyrion, from where he stood with his shoulder against the end wall of the stable, could look right into its face. Its big green eyes never blinked. "Cool as a cucumber," muttered Eustace. "It knows it has nothing to fear." The ape, chuckling and making faces, shuffled across beside the cat, put up its paw, drew the bolt, and opened the door. Tyrion thought he could hear the cat purring as it walked into the dark doorway. "Aye!" The most horrible caterwaul you ever heard made everyone jump. You have been wakened yourself by cats quarreling or making love on the roof in the middle of the night. You know that sound. This was worse. The ape was knocked head over heels by Ginger coming back out of the stable at top speed. If you had not known he was a cat, you might have thought he was a ginger-colored streak of lightning. He shot across the open grass back into the crowd. No one wants to meet a cat in that state. You could see animals getting out of his way to the left and the right. He dashed up a tree, whisked around, and hung his head downward. His tail was bristled out till it was nearly as thick as his whole body. His eyes were like saucers of green fire along the back. Every single hair stood on end. "I'd give my beard," whispered Poggin, "to know whether that brute is only acting, or whether it has really found something in there that frightened it." "Peace, friend," said Tyrion, for the captain and the ape were also whispering, and he wanted to hear what they said. He did not succeed, except that he heard the ape once more whimpering, "My head, my head!" But he got the idea that those two were almost as puzzled by the cat's behavior as himself. "Now, Ginger," said the captain, "enough of that noise. Tell them what thou hast seen." "Ah!" screamed the cat. "Art thou not called a talking beast?" said the captain. "Then hold thy devilish noise and talk." What followed was rather horrible. Tyrion felt quite certain, and so did the others, that the cat was trying to say something, but nothing came out of his mouth except the ordinary ugly cat noises you might hear from any angry or frightened old Tom in the backyard in England. And the longer he caterwauled, the less like a talking beast he looked. Uneasy whimperings and little sharp squeals broke out from among the other animals. "Look, look," said the voice of the bear. "It can't talk. It has forgotten how to talk. It has gone back to being a dumb beast. Look at its face." Everyone saw that it was true. And then the greatest terror of all fell upon those Narnians, for every one of them had been taught, when only a chick or a puppy or a cub, how Aslan, at the beginning of the world, had turned the beasts of Narnia into talking beasts, and warned them that if they weren't good, they might one day be turned back again and be like the poor witless animals one meets in other countries. And now it is coming upon us, they mourned. "Mercy, mercy," wailed the beasts. "Spare us, Lord Shift. Stand between us and Aslan. You must always go in and speak to him for us. We daren't! We daren't! Ginger disappeared further up into the tree. No one ever saw him again. Tyrion stood with his hand on his sword hilt and his head bowed. He was dazed with the horrors of that night. Sometimes he thought it would be best to draw his sword at once and rush upon the Calormenes. The next moment he thought it would be better to wait and see what new turn affairs might take. And now a new turn came. "My father," came a clear, ringing voice from the left of the crowd. Tyrion knew at once that it was one of the Calormenes speaking, for in the Tisrock's army the common soldiers call the officers "my master," but the officers call their senior officers "my father." Jill and Eustace didn't know this, but after looking this way and that, they saw the speaker, for of course people at the sides of the crowd were easier to see than people in the middle, where the glare of the fire made all beyond it look rather black. He was young and tall and slender, and even rather beautiful in the dark, haughty Calormene way. "My father," he said to the captain, "I also desire to go in." "Peace, Emeth," said the captain. "Who called thee to council? Does it become a boy to speak?" "My father," said Emeth. "Truly I am younger than thou, yet I am also of the blood of the Tarkans, even as thou art, and I also am the servant of Tosh. Therefore—" "Silence!" said Rishta Tarkan. "Am I not thy captain? Thou hast nothing to do with this stable. It is for the Narnians." "Nay, my father," answered Emeth. "Thou hast said that their Aslan and our Tash are all one. And if that is the truth, then Tosh himself is in yonder. And how then sayest thou that I have nothing to do with him? For gladly I would die 1,000 deaths if I might look once on the face of Tosh." "Thou art a fool, and understandest nothing," said Rishta Tarkan. "These be high matters." Emeth's face grew sterner. "Is it then not true that Tosh and Aslan are all one?" he asked. "Has the ape lied to us?" "Of course they're all one," said the ape. "Swear it, ape," said Emeth. "Oh dear," whimpered Shift. "I wish you'd all stop bothering me. My head does ache. Yes, yes, I swear it." "Then, my father," said Emeth, "I am utterly determined to go in." "Fool!" began Rishta Tarkan, but at once the dwarfs began shouting, "Come along, darky! Why don't you let him in? Why don't you let Narnians in and keep your own people out? What have you got in there that you don't want your own men to meet?" Tyrion and his friends could only see the back of Rishta Tarkan, so they never knew what his face looked like as he shrugged his shoulders and said, "Bear witness, all, that I am guiltless of this young fool's blood. Get thee in, rash boy, and make haste." Then, just as Ginger had done, Emeth came walking forward into the open strip of grass between the bonfire and the stable. His eyes were shining, his face very solemn, his hand was on his sword hilt, and he carried his head high. Jill felt like crying when she looked at his face, and Jewel whispered in the king's ear, "By the lion's mane, I almost love this young warrior, Calormene though he be. He is worthy of a better god than Tash." And here is a picture of this young warrior as he is about to enter the stable. Find out whatever it is that frightened the young kitty and turned him into a dumb, witless beast. Her? Is the kitty a her or a him? It was a him. All right. Oh, right. Well, okay. Well, anyway. I do wish we knew what is really inside, said Eustace. Emeth opened the door and went into the black mouth of the stable. He closed the door behind him. Only a few moments passed, but it seemed longer, before the door opened again. A figure in Calormene armor reeled out, fell on its back, and lay still. The door closed behind it. The captain leapt toward it and bent down to stare at its face. He gave a start of surprise. Then he recovered himself and turned to the crowd, crying out, "The rash boy has had his will. He has looked on Tosh and is dead. Take warning, all of you." Hey, what? There's too much going on. You need to open your door. Then put your bunny back. You need to play with your bunny during the day. Do, 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 do. Take warning, all of you. We will, said the poor beasts. But Tyrion and his friends stared first at the dead Calormene and then at one another, for they, being so close, could see what the crowd, being further off and beyond the fire, could not see. This dead man was not Emmeth. He was quite different, an older man, thicker and not so tall, with a big beard. "Ho, ho, ho!" chuckled the ape. "Any more? Anyone else want to go in? Well, as you're all shy, I'll choose the next. You boar! On you come! Drive him up, Calormenes! He shall see Tashlain face to face!" Grunted the boar, rising heavily to his feet. "Come on, then. Try my tusks." When Tyrion saw that brave beast getting ready to fight for its life, and Calormene's soldiers beginning to close in on him with their drawn scimitars, and no one going to its help, something seemed to burst inside him. He no longer cared if this was the best moment to intervene or not. "Swords out," he whispered to the others. "Arrows on the string. Follow." Next moment the astonished Narnians saw 7 figures leap forth in front of the stable, 4 of them in shining mail. The king's sword flashed in the firelight as he waved it above his head and cried in a great voice, "Here stand I, Tyrion of Narnia, in Aslan's name, to prove with my body that Tash is a foul fiend, the ape a manifold traitor, and these Calormenes worthy of death. To my side, all true Narnians! Would you wait till your new masters have killed you all one by one?" Chapter 11. The pace quickens. Quick as lightning, Rishta Tarkin leapt back out of reach of the king's sword. He was no coward, and would have fought single-handed against Tyrion and the dwarf if need were. But he could not take on the eagle and the unicorn as well. He knew how eagles can fly into your face and peck at your eyes and blind you with their wings. And he had heard from his father, who had met Narnians in battle, that no man except with arrows or a long spear can match a unicorn. For it rears on its hind legs as it falls upon you, and then you have its hoofs and its horn and its teeth to deal with all at once. So he rushed into the crowd and stood calling out, to me, warriors of the Tisroc, may he live forever! To me, all loyal Narnians, lest the wrath of Tashlain fall upon you!" While this was happening, 2 other things happened as well. The ape had not realized his danger as quickly as the Tarkan. For a second or so he remained squatting beside the fire, staring at the newcomers. Then Tyrion rushed upon the wretched creature, picked it up by the scruff of its neck, and dashed back to the stable, shouting, "Open the door!" Hugin opened it. "Go and drink your own medicine, shift," said Tyrion, and hurled the ape through into the darkness. But as the dwarf banged the door shut again, a blinding greenish-blue light shone out from the inside of the stable. The earth shook, and there was a strange noise, a clucking and screaming, as if it was the hoarse voice of some monstrous bird. The beasts moaned and howled and called out, "Tashlain, hide us from him. And many fell down, and many hid their faces in their wings or their paws. No one except Farsight the eagle, who has the best eyes of all living things, noticed the face of Rishta Tarkan at that moment. And from what Farsight saw, there he knew at once that Rishta was just as surprised and nearly frightened as everyone else. There goes one, thought Farsight, who has called on gods he does not believe in. How will it be with him if they have really come? The third thing, which also happened at the same moment, was the only really beautiful thing that night. Every single talking dog in the whole meeting, there were 15 of them, came bounding and barking joyously to the king's side. They were mostly big dogs with thick shoulders and heavy jaws. Their coming was like a breaking of a great wave on the sea beach. It nearly knocked you down, for though they were talking dogs, they were just as doggy as they could be. And they all stood up and put their front paws on the shoulders of the humans and licked their faces, all saying at once, "Welcome, welcome, we'll help, 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 show us how to help, show us how, help." It was so lovely that it made you want to cry. This, at last, was the sort of thing they had been hoping for. And when, a moment later, several little animals, mice and moles and squirrel or so, came pattering up, squealing with joy and saying, "See here, see, we're here." And when, after that, the bear and the boar came too, Eustace began to feel that perhaps, after all, everything might be going to come right. But Tyrion gazed round and saw how very few of the animals had moved. To me, he called. "Have you all turned cowards since I was your king?" "We daren't," whimpered dozens of voices. "Tashlan would be angry. Shield us from Tashlan." "Where are all the talking horses?" asked Tyrion. We've seen, squealed the mice. "The ape has made them work. They're all tied, down at the bottom of the hill." "And all you little ones," said Tyrion, "you nibblers and gnawers and nutcrackers, away with you as fast as you can scamper and see if the horses are on our side. And if they are, get your teeth into the ropes and gnaw till the horses are free and bring them hither." "With a good will, sire," came the small voices, and with a whisk of tails, those sharp-eyed and sharp-toothed folk were off. Tyrion smiled for mere love as he saw them go, but it was already time to be thinking of other things. Rishta Tarkan was giving his orders. "Forward," he said. "Take all of them alive if you can, and hurl them into the stable or drive them into it. When they are all in, we will put fire to it and make them an offering to the great god Tosh." "Ah," said Farsight to himself, "so that is how he hopes to win Tosh's pardon for his unbelief." The enemy line, about half of Rishta's force, was now moving forward, and Tyrion had barely time to give his orders. Out on the left, Jill and try to shoot. Out on the left, Jill, and try to shoot all you may before they reach us. Boar and bear next to her. Hagen on my left, Eustace on my right. Hold the right wing, Jewel. Stand by him, Puzzle, and use your hoofs. And strike, Farsight. You dogs just behind us. Go in among them after the swordplay has begun. Aslan to our aid. Here is a picture of the commotion that is going on. It looks like a great battle. Eustace stood with his heart beating terribly, hoping and hoping that he would be brave. He had never seen anything, though he had seen both a dragon and a sea serpent, that made his blood run so cold as that line of dark-faced, bright-eyed men. There were 15 Calormenes, a talking bull of Narnia, Slinky the fox, and Raggle the satyr. Then he heard twang and zip on his left, and one Calormene fell. Then twang and zip again, and the satyr was down. "Oh, well done, daughter," came Tyrion's voice, and then the enemy were upon them. Eustace could never remember what happened in the next 2 minutes. It was all like a dream, the sort you have when your temperature is over 100, until he heard Rishta Tarkan's voice calling out from the distance, "Retire! Back hither and reform!" Then Eustace came to his senses and saw the Calormenes scampering back to their friends. But not all of them. Two lay dead, pierced by Jewel's horn, one by Tyrion's sword. The fox lay dead at his own feet, and he wondered if it was he who had killed it. The bull also was down, shot through the eye by an arrow from Jill and gashed in his side by the boar's tusk. But our side had its losses too. 3 dogs were killed, and a 4th was hobbling behind the line and on 3 legs and whimpering. The bear lay on the ground, moving feebly. Then it mumbled in its throaty voice, bewildered to the last, I don't understand," laid its big head down on the grass as quietly as a child going to sleep, and never moved again. In fact, the first attack had failed. Eustace didn't seem able to be glad about it. He was so terribly thirsty, and his arm ached so. As the defeated Calormenes went back to their commander, the dwarves began jeering at them. "Had enough, darkies?" they yelled. "Don't you like it? Why doesn't your great Tarkan go and fight himself instead of sending you to be killed, poor darkies?" "Dwarfs," cried Tyrion, "come here and use your swords, not your tongues. There is still time, dwarfs of Narnia. You can fight well, I know. Come back to your allegiance." "Yeah," sneered the dwarfs, "not likely. You're just as big humbugs as the other lot. We don't want any kings. Dwarfs are for the dwarfs. Boo!" Then the drum began. Not a dwarf drum this time, but a big bull's hide Calormene drum. The children from the very first hated the sound. Boom, boom, ba-ba-boom it went. But they would have hated it far worse if they had known what it meant. Tyrion did. It meant that there were other Calormene troops somewhere near, and that Rishta Tarkan was calling them to his aid. Tyrion and Jewel looked at one another sadly. They had just begun to hope that they might win that night, but it would be all over with them if new enemies appeared. Tyrion gazed despairingly around. Several Narnians were standing with the Calormenes, whether through treachery or in honest fear of Tashlan. Others were sitting still, staring, not likely to join either side, but there were fewer animals now. The crowd was much smaller. Clearly, several of them had just crept quietly away during the fighting. Boom, boom, ba-ba-boom went the horrible drum. Then another sound began to mix with it. "Listen," said Jewel, and then "Look," said Farsight. A moment later, there was no doubt what it was. With a thunder of hoofs, with tossing heads, widened nostrils, and waving manes, over a score of talking horses of Narnia came charging up the hill. The gnawers and nibblers had done their work. Hagen the dwarf and the children opened their mouths to cheer, but that cheer never came. Suddenly the air was full of the sound of twanging bowstrings and hissing arrows. It was the dwarfs who were shooting, and for a moment Jill could hardly believe her eyes. They were shooting the horses. Dwarfs are deadly archers. Horse after horse rolled over. Not one of those noble beasts ever reached the king. "Little swine!" shrieked Eustace, dancing in his rage. "Dirty, filthy, treacherous little brutes!" Even Jewel said, "Shall I run after those dwarfs, sire, and spit 10 of them on my horn at each plunge?" But Tyrion, with his face as stern as stone, said, "Stand fast, Jewel. If you must weep, sweetheart," this was to Jill, "turn your face aside, and see you wet not your bowstring. And peace, Eustace, do not scold like a kitchen girl. No warrior scolds. Courteous words or else hard knocks are his only language." But the dwarves jeered back at Eustace. "That was a surprise for you, little boy, eh? Thought we were on your side, did you? No fear. We don't want any talking horses. We don't want you to win any more than the other gang. You can't take us in. The dwarfs are for the dwarfs. Rishta Tarkin was still talking to his men, doubtless making arrangements for the next attack and probably wishing he had sent his whole force into the first. The drum boomed on. Then, to their horror, Tyrion and his friends heard far fainter, as if from a very long way off, an answering drum. Another body of Calormenes had heard Rishta's signal and were coming to support him. You would not have known from Tyrion's face that he had now given up all hope. Listen, he whispered in a matter-of-fact voice. We must attack now, before yonder miscreants are strengthened by their friends. Bethink you, sire, said Poggin, that here we have the good wooden wall of the stable at our backs. If we advance, shall we not be encircled and get sword points between our shoulders? I would say as you do, dwarf, said Tyrion, were it not their very plan to force us into the stable. The further we are from its deadly door, the better. The king is right, said Farsight. Away from this accursed stable and whatever goblin lives inside it at all costs. Yes, do, let's, said Eustace. I'm coming to hate the very sight of it. Good, said Tyrion. Now look yonder to our left. You see a great rock that gleams white upon the marble in the firelight. Look, first we will fall upon those Calormenes. You, maiden, shall move out on our left and shoot as fast as ever you may into their ranks. And you, eagle, fly at their faces from the right. Meanwhile, we others will be charging them. When we are so close, Jill, that you can no longer shoot at them for fear of striking us, go back to the White Rock and wait. You others, keep your ears wide, even in the fighting. We must put them to flight in a few minutes, or else not at all, for we are fewer than they. As soon as I call back, then rush to join Jill at the White Rock, where we shall have protection behind us and can breathe a while. Now, be off, Jill. Feeling terribly alone, Jill ran out about 20 feet, put her right leg back and her left leg forward, and set an arrow to her string. She wished her hands were not shaking so. That's a rotten shot, she said, as her first arrow sped toward the enemy and flew over their heads, but she had another on the string the next moment. She knew that speed was what mattered. She saw something big and black darting into the faces of the Calormenes. That was Farsight. First one man, then another, dropped his sword and put up both hands to defend his eyes. Then one of her own arrows hit a man, and another hit a Narnian wolf who had, it seemed, joined the enemy. But she had been shooting only for a few seconds when she had to stop. With a flash of swords and of the boar's tusk and Jul's horn, and with the deep baying from the dogs, Tyrion and his party were rushing on their enemies like men in 100 yards race. Jill was astonished to see how unprepared the Calormenes seemed to be. She did not realize that this was the result of her work and the eagles. Very few troops can keep on looking steadily to the front if they are getting arrows in their faces from one side and being pecked by an eagle on the other. Oh, well done, shouted Jill. The king's party were cutting their way right into the enemy. The unicorn was tossing men as you'd toss hay on a fork. Even Eustace seemed to Jill, who after all didn't know very much about swordsmanship, to be fighting brilliantly. The dogs were at the Calormenes' throats. It was going to work. It was victory at last. With a horrible cold shock, Jill noticed a strange thing. Though Calormenes were falling at each Narnian sword stroke, they never seemed to get any fewer. In fact, there were actually more of them now than when the fight began. There were more every second. They were running up from every side. They were new Calormenes. These new ones had spears. There was such a crowd of them that she could hardly see her own friends. Then she heard Tyrion's voice crying, "Back to the rock!" The enemy had been reinforced. The drum had done its work. Chapter 12, Through the Stable Door. The first word is Jill. And this is the moment when we decide whether or not to read the 3rd chapter or end it here. If we read the 3rd chapter, we will have 3 chapters to go, which we could finish tomorrow theoretically. It's going to depend on Rebecca and what her timeline is. If we don't read the 3rd chapter, we will probably finish 2 on Monday. So, just Rebecca. Oh, Rebecca says another. Chapter 12. See if my voice will hold out for another chapter. Through the stable door. Jill ought to have been back at the White Rock already, but she had quite forgotten that part of her orders in the excitement of watching the fight. Now, she remembered. She turned at once and ran to it, and arrived there barely a second before the others. It thus happened that all of them, for a moment, had their backs to the enemy. They all wheeled round the moment they had reached it. A terrible sight met their eyes. A Calormene was running toward the stable door, carrying something that kicked and struggled. As he came between them and the fire, they could see clearly both the shape of the man and the shape of what he carried. It was Eustace. Tyrion and the unicorn rushed out to rescue him, but the Calormene was now far nearer to the door than they. Before they had covered half of the distance, he had flung Eustace in and shut the door on him. Half a dozen more Calormenes had run up behind him. They formed a line on the open space before the stable. There was no getting at it now. Even then, Jill remembered to keep her face turned aside, well away from her bow. Even if I can't stop blubbing, I won't get my string wet, she said. Wear arrows, said Poggin suddenly. I think it's beware. Beware arrows. But he didn't say be, he said where. Everyone ducked and pulled his helmet well over his nose. The dogs crouched behind, but though a few arrows came their way, it soon became clear that they were not being shot at. Griffel and his dwarfs were at the archery again. This time they were coolly shooting at the Calormenes. Keep it up, boys, came Griffel's voice. All together, carefully. We don't want darkies any more than we want monkeys or lions or kings. The dwarfs are for the dwarfs. Whatever else you may say about the dwarfs, no one can say that they aren't brave. They could easily have got away to some safe place. They preferred to stay and kill as many of both sides as they could, except when both sides were kind enough to save them trouble by killing one another. They wanted Narnia for their own. What perhaps they had not taken into account was that the Calormenes were mail-clad and the horses had no protection. Also, the Calormenes had a leader. Rishta Tarkin's voice cried out, 30 of you keep watch on those fools by the White Rock. The rest after me, that we may teach these sons of earth a lesson. Tyrion and his friends, still panting from their fight and thankful for a few minutes' rest, stood and looked on while the Tarkan led his men against the dwarfs. It was a strange scene by now. The fire had sunk lower. The light it gave was now less and of a darker red. As far as one could see, the whole place of assembly was now empty except for the dwarfs and the Calormenes. In that light, one couldn't make out much of what was happening. It sounded as if the dwarfs were putting up a good fight. Tyrion could hear Griffel using dreadful language, and every now and then the Tarkan calling, "Take all you can alive! Take them alive!" Whatever that fight may have been like, it did not last long. The noise of it died away. Then Jill saw the Tarkan coming back to the stable, 11 men following him, dragging 11 bound dwarfs. Whether the others had all been killed or whether some of them had got away was never known. "Throw them into the shrine of Tash," said Rishta Tarkan, and when the 11 dwarfs, one after the other, had been flung or kicked into the dark doorway and the door had been shut again, he bowed low to the stable and said, "These also are for thy burnt offering, Lord Tash." And all the Calormenes banged the flats of their swords and on their shields and shouted, "Tash! Tash! Great God Tash! Inexorable Tash!" There was no nonsense about Tashlan now. The little party by the white rock watched these doings and whispered to one another. They had found a trickle of water coming down the rock, and all had drunk eagerly, Bill and Poggin and the king in their hands, while the four-footed ones lapped from the little pool which had made it at the foot of the stone, which it had made at the foot of the stone. Such was their thirst that it seemed the most delicious drink they had ever in their they the most delicious drink they had ever had in their lives. And while they were drinking, they were perfectly happy and could not think of anything else. I feel in my bones, said Poggin, that we shall all, one by one, pass through that dark door before morning. I can think of 100 deaths I would rather have died. It is indeed a grim door, said Tyrion. It is more like a mouth. "Oh, can't we do anything to stop it?" said Jill in a shaken voice. "Nay, fair friend," said Jewel, nosing her gently. "It may be for us the door to Aslan's country, and we shall sup at his table tonight." Rishta Tarkan turned his back on the stable and walked slowly to a place in front of the white rock. "Hearken," he said, "if the boar and the dogs and the unicorn will come over to me and put themselves in my mercy, their lives shall be spared. The boars shall go to a cage in the Tisrock's garden, the dogs to the Tisrock's kennels, and the unicorn, when I have sawn his horn off, shall draw a cart. But the eagle, the children, and he who was the king shall be offered to Tosh this night." The only answer was growls. "Get on, warriors," said the Tarkan. "Kill the beasts and take the two-legged ones alive." And then the last battle of the last king of Narnia began. What made it hopeless, even apart from the number of the enemy, was the spears. The Calamines, who had been with the ape almost from the beginning, had had no spears. That was because they had come into Narnia by ones and twos, pretending to be peaceful merchants. And of course they had carried no spears, for a spear is not a thing you can hide. The new ones must have come in later, after the ape was already strong and they could march openly. The spears made all the difference. With a long spear you can kill a boar before you are in reach of his tusks, and a unicorn before you are in reach of his horn, if you are very quick and keep your head. And now the leveled spears were closing in on Tyrion and his last friends. Next minute they were all fighting for their lives. In a way that wasn't quite so bad as you might think, when you are using every muscle to the full, ducking under a spear point here, leaping over it there, lunging forward, drawing back, wheeling around, you haven't much time to feel either frightened or sad. Tyrion knew he could do nothing for the others now. They were all doomed together. He vaguely saw the boar go down on one side of him, and Jewel fighting furiously on the other. Out of the corner of one eye he saw, but only just saw, a big Palarmine pulling Jill away somewhere by her hair. But he hardly thought about any of these things. His only thought now was to sell his life as dearly as he could. The worst of it was that he couldn't keep to the position in which he had started, under the white rock. A man who is fighting a dozen enemies at once must take his chances wherever he can, must dart in wherever he sees an enemy's breast or neck unguarded. In a very few strokes, this may get you quite a distance from the spot where you began. Tyrion took his sorry. Tyrion soon fought that Try again. Tyrion soon found that he was getting further and further to the right, nearer to the stable. He had a vague idea in his mind that there was some good reason for keeping away from it, but he couldn't now remember what the reason was, and anyway, he couldn't help it. All at once, everything came quite clear. He found he was fighting the Tarkin himself. The bonfire, what was left of it, was straight in front. He was, in fact, fighting in the very doorway of the stable, for it had been open, and two Calamines were holding the door, ready to slam it shut the moment he was inside. He remembered everything now, and he realized that the enemy had been edging him to the stable on purpose ever since the fight began. And while he was thinking this, he was still fighting the Tarkan as hard as he could. A new idea came into Tyrion's head. He dropped his sword, darted forward in under the sweep of the Tarkan's scimitar, seized his enemy by the belt with both hands, and jumped back into the stable, shouting, "Come in and meet us yourself." There was a deafening noise, as when the ape had been flung in. The earth shook, and there was a blinding light. The Calamine soldiers outside screamed, "Tosh! Tosh!" and banged the door. If Tosh wanted their own captain, Tosh must have him. They, at any rate, did not want to meet Tosh. For a moment or two, Tyrion did not know where he was or even who he was. Then he steadied himself, blinked, and looked around. It was dark inside the stable as he had expected. He was in strong light. That was why he was blinking. He turned to look at Rishta Tarkan, but Rishta was not looking at him. Rishta gave a great wail and pointed. Then he put his hands before his face, and fell flat, face downward on the ground. Tyrion looked in the direction where the Tarkan had pointed, and then he understood. A terrible figure was coming toward them. It was far smaller than the shape they had seen from the tower, though still much bigger than a man, and it was the same. It had a vulture's head and 4 arms. Its beak was open, and its eyes blazed. A croaking voice came from its beak. "Thou hast called me into Narnia, Rishta Tarkan. Here I am. What hast thou to say?" The Tarkan neither lifted his face from the ground nor said a word. He was shaking like a man with a bad hiccup. He was brave enough in battle, but half his courage had left him earlier that night when he first began to suspect that there might be a real Tosh. The rest of it had left him now. With a sudden jerk, like a hen stooping to pick up a worm, Tosh pounced on the miserable Rishta and tucked him under the upper of his 2 right arms. Then Tosh turned his head sideways to fix Tyrion with one of its terrible eyes, for, of course, having a bird's head, he couldn't look at you straight. But immediately from behind Tosh, strong and calm as a summer sea. Just a minute, I'm going to show you the picture first. There's the picture. As calm as the summer sea, a voice said, "Begone, monster, and take your lawful prey to your own place, in the name of Aslan, and Aslan's great father, the Emperor over the sea." The hideous creature vanished, with the Tarkan still under its arm. And Tyrion turned to see who had spoken, and what he saw then set his heart beating as if it had never beaten in any fight. 7 kings and queens stood before him, all with their crowns on their heads and all in glittering clothes, but the kings wore fine mail as well and had their swords drawn in their hands. Tyrion bowed courteously and was about to speak when the youngest of the queens laughed. He stared hard at her face and then gasped with amazement, for he knew her. It was Jill, but not Jill as he had last seen her, with her face all dirt and tears and an old drill dress half slipping off one shoulder. Now she looked cool and fresh as if she had just come from bathing. And at first he thought she looked older, but then didn't, and he could never make up his mind on that point. And then he saw the youngest of the kings was Eustace, but he also was changed as Jill was changed. Here's a picture of the 7 kings and queens. Da, 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 da. Tyrion suddenly felt awkward about coming among these people with the blood and dust and sweat of a battle still on him. Next moment he realized that he was not in that state at all. He was fresh and cool and clean and dressed in such clothes as he would have worn for a great feast at Cair Paravel. But in Narnia your good clothes were never your uncomfortable ones. They knew how to make things that felt beautiful as well as looking beautiful in Narnia, and there was no such thing as starch or flannel or elastic to be found from one end of the country to the other. "Sire," said Jill, coming forward and making a beautiful curtsy, "let me make you known to Peter, the High King over all kings in Narnia." Tirion had no need to ask which was the High King, for he remembered his face, though here it was far nobler from his dream. He stepped forward and sank to one knee and kissed Peter's hand. High King, he said, you are welcome to me. And the High King raised him and kissed him on both cheeks, as a High King should. Then he led him to the eldest of the queens, but even she was not old, and there were no gray hairs on her head and no wrinkles on her cheek, and said, Sir, this is that Lady Polly, who came into Narnia on the first day when Aslan made the trees grow and the beasts talk. He brought him next to a man whose golden beard flowed over his breast and whose face was full of wisdom. And this, he said, is the Lord Diggory, who was with her on that day. And this is my brother, King Edmund, and this my sister, the Queen Lucy. Sir, said Tirion, when he had greeted all of these, if I have read the chronicle aright, there should be another. Has not your majesty two sisters? Where is Queen Susan? My sister Susan, answered Peter shortly and gravely, is no longer a friend of Narnia. Yes, said Eustace, and whenever you've tried to get her to come and talk about Narnia or do anything about Narnia, she says, what wonderful memories you have. Fancy you're still thinking about those funny games we used to play when we were children. Oh, Susan, said Jill, she's interested in nothing nowadays except nylons and lipstick and invitations. She always was a jolly sight, too keen on being grown up. Grown up indeed, said the Lady Polly. I wish she would grow up. She wasted all her school time wanting to be the age she is now, and she'll waste all the rest of her life trying to stay that age. Her whole idea is to race on to the silliest time of one's life as quick as she can and then stop there as long as she can. Well, don't. Let's talk about that now, said Peter. Look, here are the lovely fruit trees. Let us taste them. And then for the first time Tirion looked about him and realized how very queer this adventure was. And that is where we will stop for the day. Chapter 13 is how the dwarves refused to be taken in. The first word is Tirion. That's what you said yesterday about Jill, but that is the first word in the... And then 14, oh, you know what? We actually have 4 chapters left, so it's probably going to be, 15, 16. Yeah, 4 chapters left. So probably be not tomorrow, but the next day, Monday night when we finish the book. So the last battle. And then we've got Tuesday and Wednesday. So we'll have 2 days before we leave for the trip. And yep. So I hope that you are, and we'll come up with some short stories for those 2 days. Hope you're enjoying the story. I hope that everything is going well with you. And I'm sorry that we don't have any other people for you to talk to, but I do appreciate your comments. And I hope that you have a good night, and we will see you tomorrow night where we continue the last battle. Thank you. God bless you. We love you, Becca. Good night.